Hello, welcome. My name is Ted Coleman. I'd like to welcome you to our YouTube channel and to our interview with Jeff Kissinger. Jeff has been a flow practitioner for many years, and we're excited to have him as our first guest on this video blog, and thank you for tuning in. Jeff, could you just give us some idea of your definition of flow?
The best definition I have is maximum efficiency, high efficiency. If I'm practicing flow well, then everything is just moved right out of the way. Everything's clicking really good, it's running at its best, but in reality, nothing ever runs perfectly. And if it does, it only does it for a short amount of time. So I use flow and tools from flow to diagnose what's going wrong, and then I address those things so I can increase the efficiency and the potential more and more as I go.
So give me an example of the usage of one of the tools.
One of the tools I use a lot is the anti-flow diagnostic chart.
The flow friction analysis.
Yes, the flow friction analysis, it allows me to take a look at when there's an issue. I can identify what can solve that issue. So for instance, I was having a conversation today with somebody at work, and they're talking about a particular project, and she kept saying things indirectly at first, but then more directly that it's very anxiety driving, and there's this, it's very chaos. It's almost anarchistic. And I said, okay, so you got vision issues, right? And she goes, yeah, I think so. Is it more like the wrong vision, or is there more than one vision? She said, I think it's more than one. So I suggested, if you consider just talking and trying to get some agreement and distilling the vision, so everyone's at least on the same page. Otherwise, you guys are torn apart. And she's like, yeah, but that's kind of tough right now because it's very political. I said, okay, so it's very political. It means you guys haven't decided, which means you haven't decided on a vision, which means all these things. But it was a way to boil down what the issue is, because I can't stress enough that there's no point in trying to solve something if you don't know what you're trying to solve. So in this case, there's vision issues. I know there's also people issues, because usually it's vision, then right people. Vision, if you don't have the right vision, you're looking at anarchy. If you have the wrong people, you have anxiety. If you have poor definitions, you have confusion. If you have the wrong agreements or no agreements, you have politics. And if you can't deliver, you have chaos. And if you can't drive things forward, you have division. I mean, that's really how it boils down. And in this case, there's several things going on. As far as the people, they don't have the right people on this committee. There's 22 people on this committee, and they can't even schedule a meeting, let alone, discuss things and agree to things. So really, I think the problem right now is vision and the people, and then once they do that, they can at least define what it is they want to do. But until then, I keep getting these meeting notices, and then they get canceled. They just keep moving forward, and nothing's really going on.
And so you're using the tool to help in the clarification of what's the real issue, what are you trying to get to, what are the problems in moving something forward, and you go back to that tool in terms of just facilitating in your own mind, what should I be focused on to help this person or this project move forward?
Absolutely. It just makes it easier. It gives me better discussion points, because if I can identify what the problem is, then I can ask questions to help resolve that problem. And then when that problem starts to get resolved, then it's okay, let's run this through again and just walk it through and examine what's going on, because people start talking about problems, they fall within those categories.
Right. Yeah, and it's always very, very easy to uncover something and then ask the question based upon that, and you get the heads nodding and the people very quickly go, yeah, that's it.
Yes.
And then you can get to a point of, well, what if we considered this? And so you get a path out from that starting point.
What's really funny is what tends to exacerbate issues is they'll sit there and argue with somebody saying, no, it's this, instead of just forgetting what it is or isn't, and just helping ask questions. What's really going on here? What are you feeling?
Right.
And if I can identify what they're feeling, then I can identify the issue using that. So it works.
Now, I've seen you use vision multiple times and as a very effective tool for coalescing a team or a situation or an organization. So explain how you've used the vision aspect of flow to help advance the success for what you're doing.
Oh, boy. First thing I would suggest is, for me, I look at projects. Every project we start with is a request. It's not a project. And the first question we ask is, what do you want it to look like when it's done in 7 words or less? I would say vision, but some people don't understand vision. When I say vision, they give you a statement that's 2 paragraphs long, and no one's ever going to remember that. So I just tell them, what do you want it to look like when it's done in 7 words or less? What are we accomplishing? And then when I have that, they boil that down. Okay, well, now what about the mission? How are you going to get to that? And they give me 7 words or less. They don't like the 7 words or less part, but it makes them think, because it's not supposed to be this long drawn out statement. It's supposed to be something that people can remember. A good example of this once was a web project we did. And when we talked about vision in the past or mission, even if we talked about it, they would give this long drawn out list of goals and objectives and tasks and stuff all built into this mission statement. And I said, give me 7 words or less, what do you want it to do? And they thought about it, and I started writing stuff down. I started asking them questions. In about 5 minutes, we came up with barrier-free enrollment. Our website should be about barrier-free enrollment. That's it. And I said, if it doesn't fit within barrier-free enrollment, it goes out the window. So when we build our product board, barrier-free enrollment was always looked at. Does this help us get there or not? Groom it, throw it out, add something to it, whatever it takes. But all the things we did led to barrier-free enrollment, as much as we could during that project.
So you identified the vision, and then the team could keep coming back to that. Did you actually literally make a physical representation of that for discussion for the team?
Okay.
So you had like a sign that said barrier-free
Yes.
enrollment?
It was at the top of the product board.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
every time you were sitting down to have a discussion, the focus was on the vision of barrier-free enrollment, and it could keep coming back to, why are we here?
Mhm.
It's almost like Simon Sinek's book, Start with Why.
Yeah.
And then you keep why visible and focused so that the decisions that are being made. I love how you said that, throw it off the boat, right? If it doesn't fit in with that, why are we talking about it?
Exactly.
And so it allows you to say no.
Well, another way we do it, because when we do Scrum on our IT projects, when I'm working on them, there's the vision. And when I always say, okay, we're going to build the initial product board. So I hand out sticky notes to everybody in the room. I say, okay, I just want the big chunk deliverables. Those are going to be the epics. And they go through and they write down the big chunks that they want. And then I put them all up on the board and I say, okay, I don't know how it's going to look on the camera, but from most important over here to least important over here, order them. And they will discuss and order them. But ultimately the product owner says, I want it here, or I want this here. And then I just break down the most important one into features, and the most important features into tasks. And we have the first sprint. And it takes about an hour to start with that, and then we just keep building this stuff out. But what they want to do is they want to build out everything. I said, let's keep looking at the vision. What's most important right now based on this vision? Because we don't know what's going to come next, because we're developing things. And if you do happen to know what's going on, why fill up the board with all this needless stuff? We'll get to it when we get to it. And focusing on what's most important, being the most efficient. We got huge projects done. ERP upgrade projects. We did 6 of them. We did 2 traditional fashion ways. That's what they wanted. We had to split our big databases. We had a HR database and Campus Solutions database and PeopleSoft. We had to split them and then reattach them with software. That's what Oracle wanted. And then we did an HR upgrade. Got it all done. Good project, but they wanted to have every week an update meeting where we sit there and go through the Microsoft project list. Okay, what do you have? Well, this is about 75% done. Okay, you're 75%. We go through all that, knowing that the last 25% is going to take longer than the 75%. And then we got to the financial upgrade. And I said, I'd like to try something different. And they go, well, what do you want to do? So I want to try Scrum. and I was using Flow, and I used the Candy Game to teach them Scrum. And they went along with me. I had about this much credibility at the time with them, and they just went along with it. I said, fine, we'll do this. They had 2 teams, did the Candy Game, did their predictions, did the whole thing through. And should I explain the Candy Game? Or is this something that,
We'll do a separate video
okay,
of demonstration for the candy game that people can plug into at another time.
okay.
Come back and look for the candy game.
But in the Candy Game, I was not only able to teach them Scrum, but I could figure out who on the team is really wanting to take charge, who's supportive, who offers suggestions, who's listened to, who's not. But I was able to derive a lot of information that I can use later. So I taught them Scrum using the Candy Game, and then we did our product board, we did our first sprint, and they were just kind of going, they weren't used to it. So it's okay, we'll do another sprint. And then the second sprint, they discovered something they never would have discovered any other way if we did it the traditional way. It would have been caught maybe 3-4 months later, but it would have been a painful 2 months of rework trying to get this right, and would have put us back quite a ways. The enthusiasm would have went down, people would have just suffered, and they would have been mad, which I would understand. But what we did in that second sprint, we identified the problem. We had to redo that sprint, but it wasn't a big deal. And I had believers at that point, because they went, oh my God, this helped us catch it. So I had a traditional Kanban board I took paper, made basically my own butcher block paper out of 11.5 by 17 papers all taped together. It was real low budget, and still have it.
Yeah.
And I found this whiteboard on wheels. It had a wood frame that was being thrown out, and I grabbed that and I put it back there, and I used different color sticky notes, and I said, what do you guys want? I figured out what they wanted, and then at the very top they had the vision for that project. And I just kept saying, okay, how does this help the vision? Did our daily stand-up meetings, kept everything to 15 minutes or less. There's people that wanted to come in there and talk. There was 2 meetings. I only had to do it, actually the first one, the second one, they knew I was gonna walk out. But after 15 minutes, I said, all right, bye. And they go, whoa, the meeting's not over. I said, yes, it is. This is a 15-minute meeting. What'd you get done yesterday? What do you plan on doing today? What are your roadblocks? That's it. I don't care about all this other stuff. That's not for me. That's for you. And they felt offended because I was in a culture of meetings of just talking. And after that, the daily stand-ups became 10 minutes or less than 5 minutes or less in most cases. Because they came in and said, I got this done, I got problems with this, I need help with this, okay, we'll talk about that after this, we'll get this done, okay? And then we move on into the project, and we got done the last 4, now 5, we had another one we just did, big projects, all done with this, but it was using Flow, because anytime there was issues that came up, I'd go back into diagnosing what the issue was, and things were solved very quickly. This particular project, this first one we did, is typically a 6-month project, and the last time we did it, it cost $250,000 in consulting. And I asked the team, I said, do you know how to do this work yourself without consulting? And they said, yes. You're an autonomous team. Do you want to take that on, to do this without consulting? We can have a consulting budget if you want. And they said, set it at about $75,000. We used 5,000 of it. And we didn't really need to use at least 3,000 of it. We just had some people on call during go live just in case as insurance. The project was a 6-month project. We got it done in 3.5. And it went really well.
With the same people from the previous project.
Well, actually, one of the guys from the previous project, we had one new team member on this, who worked really good in this environment. He's the kind of person who really works well in an autonomous environment. I kept people back. I kept people away. Product owner wasn't involved in any retrospectives, except at the very end. And we just let the team work and let them do what they had to do. It was very unusual for them, but it worked.
So what's been the effect on prioritization for you personally, for teams, but also organizationally?
I'll start organizationally. Before we had a project prioritization process that was basically 15, it started out as 13 and 15 and 17 people in a room that were all mid-level managers, and they are either sent there, they were initially invited, but then they ended up sending proxies, and the proxies are sending proxies. The process was done with a form. There was a feasibility process. It was a Excel spreadsheet. It was passed through a workflow process that only one person could do at a time. So it would take months for something to even make it through a feasibility. And there was, anybody can request anything at any time, and they're constantly revising the prioritization, having to walk through everything. It was a very inefficient process. You asked me what flow is, it was not that. You know, there was no maximum efficiency, there was no performance there. It wasn't high performance at all. So the person who ran that process was moved into another position, and then I was asked, you know, how do you want to do this process? And I told them, well, I would change everything. And the first thing I would do is I'd change the form. The form you had to submit before was about a 30-question form. And what most people do in those forms, they go ASDF, 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 just to get through the text. And you have to call them up anyway and interview them and figure out what they want. So I made the form real simple. Simple contact information, what do you want, when do you want it? And then as soon as we get that form, we notify them that we want to have an interview with them. Usually half hour, an hour, and we do project research, but it starts with what's the vision for it, what's the mission, what are the goals, and the main objectives. And then we get into deliverables, and we get into breaking down the main breakdown of the deliverables, but then we view it from the 6 constraints of project management. So we have time, cost, scope, quality, resources, risk, and opportunity. And all the questions are around that, but it all focuses back onto the vision. How does this accomplish this? So we do the research and figure out what it is. We take that and we send it back to the people. And we've defined what the project request is, okay? And we send it back to them to get agreement on this is what you want, correct? Once we have that agreement, we send it off to the people who are the IT directors. The IT directors take a look at it with their teams. They get it a week ahead of time because we sit down in a meeting. We grab time at the beginning of their director meeting, which happens every week. We usually grab a half hour, 45 minutes of that meeting when we start getting project requests. Oh, that's another thing. Project request season is from November until February. And that aligns with the budget request process for mid-year budgets and planning and budgets for the next fiscal year. It falls in line with the meetings that happen to figure all that stuff out, falls in with department planning, it falls in with all that. So any project that's gonna be a change would fall in with that.
So in the past, you had a committee that met every month,
Yes.
and
Sometimes twice a month.
sometimes twice a month, and any new project could come in at any time. Nothing ever went away.
Right.
It was a stack of like 150.
When we first got it,
projects.
it was 150 projects. It broke down to about a little over 100. And then we had just this overflow of projects. But the problem was, people would say, okay, we got your project prioritized, and we're gonna do it. Because we had to do everything that came in. That was the focus of it. And something else would come along, and something else would come along. The thing is, you had it sitting in the middle and not even getting near the top. At the most, you had maybe a dean or two would sit on it. They started sending somebody else after a while. And they're still not the top of the organization. It's vice presidents and the president. So when somebody else would get to the top, then someone else who was above and wanted something else, they'd throw the hand grenade over the cubicle and get what they wanted. The last time we did the process that way, of the 27 or 30 projects we did that year, a little over 20 or 22 of them were all overrides. So, as I was getting at, we have project request process from November to February. We research them, we get agreement on what it is we're doing. Everybody agrees by writing an email, send it off to the IT directors. IT directors review with the team. They meet the following week with it, and I come in and I just ask questions. I take a look at it. Some projects are very clear that it's going to be mostly in this team or that team, but I always go to the ones that are barely anything. So, do you have anything that I missed that you want to add to this? And we just ask a few questions. How much time is it going to take based on what you know? Is there any money involved? And who's going to be involved? You know, what by role? We can do it by role, we can do it by people. And we do an executive summary, true one-page executive summary, which has what are we doing, why are we doing it, and here's the resources that are going to be needed in order to do this. And then at any point along the way, from the time it's requested, from the time that we're doing research, feasibility, which goes on to the next step, which the president takes a rubric, which I'll talk about in a minute, and scores it, all the way up to the vice presidents and the president. It can be killed at any time, the request. Only the strong survive in this process. But that's the whole point of this. It's keeping it at the top. All prioritization is done at the very top. When the vice president of IT, which is the CIO, gets this information, as he looks at each request, he scores it using a rubric. Now, the rubric was something we came up with, but we tested it by taking project requests, take the same project requests instead of Dave, my boss. You score it, I score it, and we came within plus or minus 3 points based on this 99-point scale is what it is. And the very first question in the 7-question rubric is, how does this align with the mission, vision, values, and ends of the college? And it's heavily weighted on that question. And then each successive question is just another piece of the mission, vision, values, and ends. How does this help students? How does this, is this gonna be financially feasible? You know, how's this gonna add money, take away money? Can we support it if we build it? Those kind of questions.
And when you say ends, that's the goals.
Yes,
So that's a term that's used in
yes,
the college to describe the goals.
yes.
Okay.
So as we go through this rubric, I said, okay, let's take it to the vice presidents, let them score it. So we took a bunch of project requests, they scored them, they all came in plus or minus 3. And then they agreed, after they sat and looked at the rubric, they agreed that this is the rubric we're gonna use. Perfect. We programmed it into Microsoft Project. Not a huge project person, but for the business intelligence piece and the visibility that our CIO uses when scoring it, because he can look at everything all at once, it's really great for him. And it crunches the numbers and it comes up with a score. And then he can say, everything above this line, we have a capacity now. Because before we did everything we could and we always came up short. But we say, this is our capacity, and our capacity is measured by what the directors say their project people have time for, or their people doing operations. And this is, and most of our projects go through certain departments. We based it on that, and we adjusted our capacity this year because we had some things that were coming in and we knew we were gonna take more time. So we started at 15, we would do for sure, and 5 we would do if we got time, everything else was off the boat. This year it's 8 and 3, so we have 11 possible that we'll do because of the size of the projects and the nature of them. So we always look at it, how's this gonna work? Do we have enough capacity? Do we need less capacity, more capacity based on what we have? And sometimes we can get capacity with contractors, and sometimes we don't have the money to get contractors, so we can't. So we always try to adjust it and make sure it makes sense.
So you're clarifying the vision, you're optimizing the capacity of the organization in delivering against the vision, the business value they've established, using the executives to prioritize the incredible potential breadth of everything that everybody wants to get done into the narrow focus of this is the most important thing
Right.
and set of things to work on for the next period of time. And what did that do to the noise level of the organization as it relates to your department or your job?
Before, we were constantly being screamed at. Because everybody who could get to somebody else above the last person who got something prioritized would do it. Now they have to go all the way up to their VP. And there's 4 vice presidents and a president. That's what it comes down to. The noise level went down to a whisper. I could barely, hear anything. Anytime somebody said, well, I don't like that, and I said, well, we'll talk to your vice president. This is the process. This is the process that they agreed to. It's not my process. I just help manage it.
So all the politics, all the tribal warfare, all the he said, she said, biggest stick, hair on fire, tribal warfare all went away.
Yeah, well, the beauty of it is, once my boss, the CIO, gets all the project requests, and we call them project requests, we don't call them projects. We never call projects until they're okayed. And the ones that aren't were failed project requests. Because when you tell them it's a project, they immediately have an expectation that, well, we gotta do this. So these project requests, once the ones that are gonna be approved are approved, we move them forward into projects. Now, before that happens, the vice presidents take a look at all this stuff. 90% of what my boss scores it as, they'll just accept. But they tend to fight. I think you gave it a good term, cage fight, over maybe 2 or 3 requests. And it doesn't really move much after that. Since the first couple years we did it, my boss added a couple other layers into it. What he does is he'll do his initial scoring, and then he'll sit with the project managers and say, is there anything you want to fight for in here? And we'll give him his fight, but he rarely changes his mind. And then he brings it to the to the IT directors. Same thing, rarely changes his mind. Brings it to the dean's council and to the cabinet, work his way all the way up. But he comes in and basically, you gotta have a really good reason for me adjusting. And a couple times things adjusted, but it just adjusted in the same, like it went from fourth to third. You know, once in a great while, something will rise to the top. But he does that to cover his self as he moves forward. And then when he gets to the vice presidents, you know, it's pretty much a done deal. You know, with the exception, there's usually one or two that will sit there, well, I really want this one. But here's the difference. Before, it's like, add to the capacity, even though we can't do it in terms of time. It's like, okay, you wanna put something in there, what are you taking out? And they have to agree to it. Each VP gets one override, and they don't often use them. So you have few to no overrides, you have no noise, or very little noise. I don't notice it anymore, maybe I block it out, but I just don't hear it anymore. You have fewer projects that we're actually doing, we can finish those projects, and if a project rolls into the next year, it's okay. We roll it in, we mark it saying this is something from the previous year that's finishing up, and we adjust our capacity accordingly. So we're doing what we can do. But that's all flow. That's all rooted in flow.
So what would you say, you've been running Inflow for 5 or 6 years now, right?
What do you think? I would have to say 7. I met you in 2012.
There you go. So in that time frame, what would you say is the most impactful, best result story from your utilization of Flow?
I told a couple of those stories. The project prioritization that.
And that's an amazing story, by the way. I use it all the time because it's so impressive that you moved out of the weeds and now the executives own it. And organizationally, the clarity is just eliminated the politics and the noise for the whole organization. That's powerful.
And the beauty of that is the rubric, the language that is used, it's all the language of the leadership. If you root everything in the mission, vision, values, and ends, that's the stuff they wrote. That's the stuff they agreed on. That's the stuff they went off to workshops and figured out. That's the stuff that this
Paid high-priced consultants to come help.
Yes, but that's the stuff they did. That's what's important to them. So when you say, how does this thing that somebody over here requested, how does this get us closer to this thing that we want? Because there's always that bridge, which I learned with Flow, the language of tasks and management as opposed to the language of leadership and vision. And that line that's between those two, my job is to connect over the line or break the line out altogether. And that rubric did that. It's something that every question that's asked of the people applies to that rubric. And how well is it answered and by the people that are scoring it that have to agree with it. It connects that vision, strategy, projects, tasks all the way down, and it brings it all the way back up. And that is essential to making this work. Now, does it mean I just set it up once and we just let it go? No. You know, it takes tending. There's somebody who always wants to come along, wants to wreck it because they don't agree because they're not getting what they want. So the way I deal with them is like, well, what is it you want to accomplish?
Take them back to the vision.
Exactly. It's like we all want the same thing, and maybe you got a different way of doing it, but it's like how can we accomplish this together? Because there is no flow if there's no unity.
Right. And the unity has to be around the declared and the lived vision of the organization.
Yes.
And that structural flow against that vision brings the whole group together to accomplish what you said you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
So in that whole process, one of the things we have in the book and in use is the AHA curve,
Mm-hmm.
where you struggle for a period, then you go through the motions. There comes a point at which an individual, a team, even an organization, the light goes on.
Right.
So how would you say the AHA curve had operated in that whole process for prioritization?
For prioritization, it was the first time we went through it. And when it was all done, everyone just sort of went, oh, so these are the projects we're working on, and we're not doing these. Okay. It was just kind of like, hey, Yeah, one of the things we did also in that first year, we took the backlog of all these promise projects, and instead of saying, we'll do these and then we'll start the process, what we did is you need to re-request them if it's important to you. Somebody's been on the books for 3 years and nothing happened. And with IT projects, it's likely gonna be, well, we don't need this anymore, we found something else, or,
Technology changed.
yes. So out of, I think there was 35, we sent them back out saying, if you want to request them, you're not gonna get them necessarily. It has to go through the process, but if you wanna re-request them, please do. And we made the form really easy, we did the research, but more than half of them didn't even request, it's, I don't care. And the ones that did, we went through and they went through the prioritization process, a few made it through and some others didn't, but that was it. And then we didn't have a backlog anymore.
Did you have a personal aha moment in terms of flow and recognizing that's something I could really use? It's gonna be powerful for me personally.
The thing I mentioned before about you call it something else, I still remember as the diagnostic chart, but.
The flow friction analysis.
Flow friction analysis. That has been probably the greatest thing I've had. But I also, when I've explained it to other people, and when I walk them through, I get that moment every time, because I learn something as I convince somebody this works, then I see the lights go on in them, then the lights go on in me at the same time. I've had people ask me, because I've had the pleasure of helping out with training this, I really like turning the lights on for people. And when I see the lights go on, because they realize how simple it can be. It's not easy, but the concepts are very simple. And if it weren't for people, it'd be purely simple.
Just take them out of the mix and it would be really simple. Yeah.
Yes. But you asked about another, as far as an aha moment, I remember was the one with the team that I started with to do Scrum, and showing them how all this stuff worked together. And when they got to that second sprint and they found failure, but they failed early and fast, and just the look on their face of like, oh my God, if this would have been a few months from now, it would have been awful. And then they realize it's not a few months from now, we're creating increments of useful stuff that we didn't create this time, but we realized what we did wrong. And you could see them just kind of refreshed. And after that, they were, on time for those stand-up meetings, and they were, really engaged. And that's the real key. I mean, flow brings engagement. It's something that, when everything's working together, I talk to people after the stand-up meeting sometimes. I just kind of slink by, hey, how's it going? What's, kind of creeping around the corner. Hey, how you doing? And they're like, oh yeah, I got this going on, I got that going on, and everything's working pretty good. It's like, okay, good. The best compliment I got, we just finished that project. It took 3.5 months. And I always been really good at trying to secure money for parties. So we had this, we went and got barbecue. And the guy who was the lead on this project drove me over there to pick it up in his van. And he said, I gotta tell you, this is gonna sound arrogant, I'm sorry. He says, you managed this project really well. I mean, this is like the best project I've ever been on. And I said, I hardly did anything. All I did is I kept people away from you. I kept you focused on what was important, and you did the rest. And that's flow. It's about focus. It's about, if you're not caught up in the noise and the politics and the drama and all these other things that are going on, if I can just identify the thing that you need to do, why are you doing this? It just works. And you got the right people. I said, you're the right person for this. You knew what needed to be done. You've been through it before. You've been through hell with a previous project. Now you have the experience of that. I wanted to utilize that. I want to call on a bunch of consultants who are going to disagree with you and then fight with them. And we'd be in confusion. And we'd be in politics, and we'd be all these other things. So it went well because we had the right people. We had the right vision. We had, everything well defined. We agreed on the things that we needed to do. We followed through, we delivered it. It drove us forward each sprint and then in each project. Because after that, we did our projects all the same way. All of them came in well ahead of time. We have such small windows where we can implement, so we have to hit those windows. But it was pretty, we'd come across issues as they come, but we find them right away and identify them and fix them. Instead of, okay, we're doing our 2-week little wrap up here with Microsoft Project, or 1 week, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm 75%, I'm 85, I'm 90% done. None of that. I just said it's either done or not done. Done is going to be what the product owner says it's done. And everything seemed to work really well. We've done all our projects like that with those upgrade projects, and they're huge.
So in this, when you're starting teams, you obviously train them, get them launched, fired up and moving in the right direction. But we find pushback organizationally many times where we come in and we say, it's gonna be a 2-day training. It's gonna be a 3-day training in order to launch that team. And the first reaction is, we don't have 3 days.
Mhm.
We cannot do that. And what would your response be to somebody that says, we can't afford the time to get training in flow, to understand that, we can't afford that time? What would your response to them be?
Can you afford the time you're gonna lose without having it? Now, they'll tell me, well, we aren't gonna need it, we've done this before, we've been around the block, we've done all this kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, you've been around the block, but much like an abusive relationship, you may have gotten used to it. And what would it take for you to just stop? Because people don't like change generally. And if they got really good at doing something, even if it's painful, they don't wanna change that either. But what I try to do is give them some of the best stuff that I have to convince them otherwise. There was somebody was asking me about flow, whether they should take the training or not. And I said, okay, well, tell me about a project you're working on right now. And we talk about all this, the drama, this and that. All I hear is definition issues, confusion issues, people issues, and all this stuff. And I said, okay, I'm gonna give you a little something that I use, and I go back to the flow friction analysis. I said, what about this right here? This seems to be a problem. Okay, how do you see that as a problem? Well, you have people that are confused, they're asking you kinds of questions, they don't know what to do. And they're starting to distance themselves or being disengaged from the project. How can you bring them back in? Would it help to define what those issues are? And she said, yeah, it would. And then once you define it, would it help to make some decisions, distill the agreements, so everyone's in lockstep going forward? Yeah, I guess it would. So there you go.
Welcome to flow.
I said, that's basically all I'm doing. You're guiding the conversation, you're getting people focused on what they need to focus on and ignoring the noise. Because there's always gonna be noise.
Right.
And if you get people on your team that aren't working out, no matter what you try, then you have the wrong person. Which they're creating anxiety on the team, which infects the other people.
Or a toxic person,
Yes.
which also creates anxiety on the team.
Yeah.
And
I had somebody who did not want to do things the way we were doing things for the upgrade projects. She hated sticky notes, she hated all that kind of stuff. Smart, very smart lady, but she just, I don't have time for this stuff, so I used humor. I said, I'm just gonna put sticky notes all over your chair when you get back. Or I'm gonna, and I would let her talk more than most people would during a stand-up meeting, to kind of get it out, because she loved to talk. And then I would just focus on her and say, okay, what did you get done yesterday? You know, what are you planning on doing today? What are roadblocks you have right now? And I'm taking notes and stuff like that if I was doing it. I'd write up a sticky note, I'd stick it up there, that's something she said. And it brought things in. Once she saw it working, then she fell in, but she still didn't like it because it wasn't what she'd been doing for 30 years. But she saw it working and she at least went along with it. That to me is a win, as opposed to.
well, that's an aha moment,
Yes.
where she sees it working and goes, okay, I can buy into that.
Mhm.
Because people want to have positive results.
Yeah.
People like to be part of a winning thing. It's just the intrinsic result of somebody saying, yeah, that's working and I like things to work, so I'll do that.
But what the greatest part of this is they've gotten so used to it working well. I mean, we did a lot of upgrades. We just finished one back in October, and it went really well. And what's beautiful is the next day after it's gone live, we go to the help desk. Any calls? No. You know, a couple little minor things pop up, things we knew were coming because we identified it. We knew it wasn't a showstopper, but we knew a way to control it. Is it under control? Yeah. You know, it's what it is. You know, it's really about keeping the communication open. Everyone's got ideas. Let's listen to what's going on. Let the team deal with their own issues. You know, there's a time I did it wrong. I became project manager in the middle of a Scrum project, and I screwed some things up. I insulted somebody without knowing I insulted them. I caused somebody to feel like.
That's actually one of my native talents. I see that often.
But after I helped straighten it out and said, look, during the retrospect, I said, I did this wrong, I did that wrong, And it opened up people to talk about the things they weren't doing right. Hey, we don't have content. We feel, we're trying to, we feel scared that we're not getting this done right. It's all right, let's start over. And we'll start over from square one. And we did. We ended up finishing this project. It was already 3 months in and getting very little done. We finished it up in 6 weeks with 2-week sprints.
And some of the conflicts that were happening prior to that were probably that lack of communication or assumptions that were being made. And literally by throwing yourself on the sword and admitting, you know what, guys, I screwed up with this.
Yeah.
It opened up their ability to say, yeah, and this should have been done and this should have been done. Now you can bring the team in unity. And so for 3 months, you're oscillating as opposed to iterating towards success. But the minute you have that ability to have an open adult conversation and come to a point of, okay, what do we really try to do in the next short sequence? Now you see the result. And we've got hundreds of examples of that with exponential results, 600% increase in 90 days, 1,000% increase in productivity in less than 6 months, over and over and over again. And as you said, it's so simple, and yet it's so powerful.
Yes.
And because it's so simple, a lot of people dismiss it. And what would you want to say to those people that want to dismiss it?
I think you just have to try it. And it's something, for people that it's difficult to change, it's going to be hard. You're going to be having issues with it. But I think start with something simple. I mean, just clarifying a vision. I still can't tell you what the vision statement of the company I work for. I try. I try to memorize it. It just doesn't flow off.
Well, and the reason you keep trying to memorize it is when I had you in training and put you through public shaming for not being able to remember it, and it's always wonderfully satisfying for me to see you
sure
squirm.
it is, yes. But one thing I would tell people is, it's hard to argue with the results, but you can if you want to. You can always say, well, my company doesn't do it this way. I've done talks on the prioritization process for people wanting to change their prioritization process. And the first question I get is, well, my company doesn't work that way. And I said, okay, tell me how your company works. I'm not saying you have to do it exactly like us, but one thing I will tell you is the higher up you put prioritization, the less likely it's going to be overridden. That's a fact. The fewer people you have involved in deciding prioritization, the better off it's going to be. If you have more than 7 people on a team trying to decide something important, it's not going to get done.
Right.
You gotta have simplicity.
Well, no, they'll form a committee.
Yes, they'll form multiple committees. And the committee work will be considered work when it's not getting anything done. Because we had meetings. We had lots of meetings about this.
Oscillating.
Yes.
We're going in circles now.
And I'll tell people, I do it half jokingly. I say, I don't like meetings. The only time I like to meet is when decisions need to be made. And if there's anything else, unless we're doing some kind of exploratory stuff that's gonna lead to decisions
Or
someday.
pizza.
Or, yeah, and keep people well fed. But I like to give a good example. I'll ask somebody, okay, you've done a system upgrade, how did you do your testing? How did testing get done? And if they tell me, well, people always test at the last minute anyway, it's really hard. I said, yeah, I understand that. Here's what we did. And this is directly from Flow. I contacted all the people who were gonna test. I talked to one of our subject matter experts, and I said, who is the best people to test the things we're gonna do? Because when you do a system upgrade, a lot of people have to be involved. So give me the best people, the people that can represent what other people would do, not just get everybody. Give me the right people. And then
I've read that someplace.
and I said, well, what we're trying to accomplish, we want to have a successful upgrade. That's the vision. We want to get the right people. And then defining what the testing is going to be. So we have to say, we need these things tested in your areas, by your scripts. Do you need definitions on your scripts? But they generally know what their scripts are. What we did differently is we held 4 meetings. And we got them the test instance. We're supposed to go live in late October. We got them the test instance ready in August, knowing that they're not going to touch it right away because it's right at the beginning of school and semester. And where I work has seasons, and we're in the semester beginning season. But we knew they were going to test things, so I set a meeting for mid-September, end of September, 3 weeks before go live, and the week of go live. And at each meeting, I would ask them 3 questions. What did you get done? what are you planning on doing next? And what are your roadblocks? And I make the meeting intentional on, well, the meeting isn't gonna last more than 15 minutes, okay, with all the people in the room. But I set the meeting for an hour and a half in a room full of computers. So wait, okay, so, I mean, it's, and like you said, I always find it funny, I like to steal winning lines, it's either, public success or public shaming. And the people that are feeling shame start to squirm in their chair a little bit, and say, it's okay, so you didn't get it done. You are in a place right now, you have an hour and a half on your calendar where you can start testing. What's amazing is once they start testing, get 15 minutes into it, they're into it, and they're testing, and they'll sit there and they'll work it out. And then we also circulate, the subject matter expert I work with, I have them make calls, drop-bys, all kind of stuff. I could walk by somebody's desk during testing, before or after the meeting. And they're just walking by or seeing the hallway, hey, how's it going? Well, I got this done, and I'm working on it. I say, that's great, thank you very much. I don't have to say a word because they know that we're doing it. I said, you can sign off in increments. You can sign off on this piece. Let's say you got this much, you can sign off on this and this and this, and you still have this left. That's great. You don't have to do it all at once. We don't want you doing this the day before go live. What happened is
Or the day after.
Yeah. But the thing is, the testing works so well, because I talked to you before, we didn't get hardly any calls about anything. The testing worked so well, sign-offs were done a week beforehand. So we had a whole week of not having to worry about testing, which is a huge thing. It reduces anxiety levels.
It's unheard of.
Yes.
Yeah.
It reduces anxiety levels, people feel confident they're going into it. And we go into go live and we invite the people in if they wanna come in and sit through go live and do some, because we have to do testing after go live just to make sure. And there's people that are invited and they say, no, I feel pretty good about it. And then we go live. And I'm going, I don't
Crickets.
I don't hear a whole lot. And it's because they work well together, we trust them to do the testing, but we give them sign-off points. And like sprints, but for a group of people that generally don't work together, doing their own testing. And it worked, but that's all based in partly in Scrum, but it's also based in Flow, because we wanted to be able to connect them to what it is we're trying to do. We wanted the right people in the room, define what it is you gotta do, agree that this is done or not done, deliver it, and so we can drive it forward to the next time we meet, and just keep cycling it through.
A short cycle with that 4D
Yeah.
iterative approach focused around the
But it
vision.
also takes into account the people, the processes, the relationships, the people in the room, because they can talk about things. We bring our analysts to the room so they can ask questions of them when they want to do that. And it also, the tools and the technology, what kind of stuff do you need? Sometimes in the midst of this, we need training if we get something new. One of the things we did involve training was like, how much training do we really need? So we went into defining what the training was, decided this is what we need to do. We delivered a small 5-minute package of training, which is because it's a whole new navigation to the system. And how we did it, we have a great media department, so we used the right people in the media department. We had the right person to do the actual training, put some really cool light boards together and had all this stuff go through, put together this 5-minute package of training that did wonders. No calls on how to navigate, right at first. And anybody did call, it's like, did you watch the video? Oh, no. Oh, I get it. It was that simple. Otherwise, it would have thrown a lot of people off, because thousands of people, I'm sorry, I take that back. Hundreds of people in this case, the students, they just figured it out.
Right.
Because,
They're digital natives.
yes,
They-
they just want to know, why can't I just do it on my phone this way,
I should just be able to scroll and move it to here.
Yes. So, but it worked out really well that way. But again, I use Flow to just draw back, what are we focusing on? And it's a great tool for focusing people, because the people I work with generally know what to do, they just have to know what to work on.
Right.
And if they're working on the wrong thing, they'll do that really well, but it's the wrong thing.
Yeah, Peter Drucker said it's one of the saddest things that a company can do is to be very effective and very efficient at the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So you always want to be able to maintain organizational focus, identify and focus on the most important thing.
Right. You can't do that without Flow. You can do it in some way, but it makes
Well,
it harder.
if you have a really strong leader, you can do it effectively without the structure of flow.
But if the leader
they're
goes
doing
away-
it intuitively, and when the leader's not there,
Yeah.
it does not happen organizationally. That
Right.
is true.
That's what makes it difficult.
Yeah.
You have to be able to, regardless of leadership, have the company continue to move forward.
And the structure of flow facilitates that and allows it to happen.
Yeah.
Although, the other thing Drucker said is there's only 3 things that happen naturally in an organization: friction, confusion, and underperformance. everything else requires leadership. I believe that's absolutely true. So even with flow, you have a structure and a framework that allows you to facilitate high performance as an individual, a team, or an organization. But if you don't have leadership, the wheels will fall off any framework or any structure.
Yes.
And flow just facilitates the ability of people to enter into what the leader's trying to accomplish, to do it very quickly, and to maintain that for themselves, their team.
Right, but that comes with alignment. How does it
Yes.
align with their own personal vision, VSBT, we were talking about
Yep.
before, vision, strategy, project tasks, up to the team, up to the department, up to the division, up to the
Yep.
very top and all the way back down. But that's the hardest part. I mean, where I work at, I was able to work with the project prioritization and doing certain things with projects, but there's always somebody who wants to try, like a new person comes along, we just had a new provost come on. And he wanted to know why this particular project was rated so high. And my boss came to me and said, can you give me the rubric written out as it is? I just printed it off, because there you go. And I printed the PDF, I'm sorry. There's no paper involved in this, I promise. And but he took that with him and just showed him, and said, this is how we score things. It met within this, that everybody agrees these are the things we look for. Now, at some point, I'm sure they're going to say, should we change the rubric? And I'll say, okay, do you want to have less importance of vision? Do you want more? Do you want, these are all things that are factors that determine whether or not a project not only is going to be successful, but the thing we build is going to be used and we can support it. If we can't do those things, there's no point in doing it, because all we're doing is we're creating more operational work. Right. And more cost and more, when you put all these things together, you have more headaches and things that are slowing us down. We should be looking to get rid of things before we start adding things.
Right.
Because it's
And
not
if you do
focused.
add something, how do you maintain the balance and pull something else off the
Right.
plate? So the most important thing is always the thing you're working on.
Right, and it all needs to be tied to vision.
Right.
Because I was asking, well, how do we decide which of these systems we use or don't use? So how does it reflect what we're trying to do? Why are we here? If 2 or 3 people are using a system that costs $12,000 a year to maintain, how important is it? Maybe those 2 or 3 people are vice presidents and they need this thing in order to do it, and it provides $100,000 in value, then okay. But we have to look at it, we have to decide it, and we have to either move it on and, keep it going or get rid of it. And start phasing it out. One of the biggest problems we have is people want to do projects, but we're too busy trying to maintain the stuff we've done over the years. And the ability for people to do work on projects shrinks. If we don't get rid of stuff, it'll keep shrinking.
Right.
But they want more.
In,
And they don't want to add more human resources, so you got to work with what we got.
in software, that's called technical debt.
Yes.
Where it takes so much time to keep the duct tape and baling wire on the old stuff that you don't have time to move up the real things forward.
Yeah.
And I call it organizational debt.
Yes.
It's the same thing. It's the compensating practices that strip your ability to do the work of the vision, because you have to put out that fire, you have to fix that item, you have to move things around with administrative overload because you haven't done the work of prioritization and focused on the most important thing,
Yeah.
which is the vision of the organization. So this is excellent. Jeff, I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today to share some of your thoughts on flow. And I'm looking forward to obviously continuing to work with you for years to come.
Definitely.
Thank you again.
Thanks, Tim.
And we'll see you next time on the video blog for Flow.